Hi, I'm Mark Cleghorn and welcome to our Xperience wedding series. In this session we're going to be looking at 3 tips for starting a wedding photography business. So weddings are unlike, I think, any other genre of photography, whereas there are pressures to do with a moment in time that you can never be repeated. So unlike a portrait where basically you could get the client back in again, whereas in wildlife photography perhaps you can kind of revisit again. You might miss the perfect shot, but you're not going to get sued by anybody. Whereas in wedding photography there's this pressure of basically the biggest day of people's lives, and obviously if things go wrong they're basically going to be a little bit upset. So when we're looking at the 3 tips in getting started, we've got to take some of the pressure off you. And I'm gathering at this point you've got little experience in wedding photography as a pro or even as an advanced amateur, and you're really kind of getting going from the beginning. So first things first, try and shoot for a colleague or a friend's wedding to give you a little bit more experience than you've got now. Friends and family can be the worst. However, they're the simplest ways to actually get going. It might even be that you're kind of shooting over the professional photographer's shoulder. I hope you're not actually physically doing that, off to the side or whatever. But learn to observe what another photographer is doing. That's one of the things when I set up the Photographer Academy, it was kind of an insight to real weddings. And if you haven't watched the real weddings on the Photographer Academy, I definitely do that as well, because it'll give you some idea on basically what to actually expect. So when you start to shoot for a friend's wedding, of course, you've still got all the pressures theoretically, except because we haven't put the finances there, there's going to be a little bit more relaxed. But at least you'll be able to actually explain to them, look, you know, I haven't shot any weddings before. I'm looking to really get going. I'd love to do your wedding, but as long as you realize I'm just starting out, otherwise, you know, you've got to book your own photographer right from the go. So as far as shooting a wedding for the first time by yourself is concerned, I would probably say that once you've had some experience of shooting off to the side as a second shoot or perhaps whatever, when you start to actually shoot weddings for real, it's better to start with friends and family. The next tip I've got is really getting out there and practicing. And obviously, like a wedding day, they're kind of, you know, they're real. Their time won't stand still for anybody. And so the only way for you to really practice is to practice with a bride and groom, family, friends who've actually had wedding photos done in the past, or even going to the extent of hiring a local model couple for you to actually get some great images with. You might even know the girl next door and a boyfriend that she's got like a bit of a prom dress and he's got a bit of a suit, so at least you can go out there and actually pretend to be it. So do you need to worry about flowers and basically buttonholes? Probably not when you're practicing, but obviously if you're really looking to develop your portfolio as well, it's better to actually make that little bit of investment into a simple posy and obviously a kind of a groomsman lapel kind of flower as well. But what you want to do in the practicing is to ensure that you're thinking about the elements of what is going to be your type of photography, your style of photography. So for instance, if you're going to be a little bit more of a reportage, you could instigate a scene where the couple are walking, couple are chatting, couple are sitting down on a bench, whatever it would be. But then you can actually see where you need to move and how fast you need to move to actually get the interaction with that couple as they naturally animate themselves. One of the problems you've got if it's going to be the likes of a models putting together where they don't know each other, it's going to be very hard for them to animate and bring a natural kind of reaction to each other. So even when you're trying to shoot a reportage style of relaxed photography, there's still going to be some of the pressures there because you need to capture the moment. But you need to practice with the right lens, whether it's going to be a long lens at f2.8 or a wide angle lens. You've got to kind of find your style amongst those images, and that's why practicing with a couple. Also go to different types of locations during the course of the day. Perhaps go to a park, go to something more dramatic with a little bit of architecture like we're seeing in this image. In fact, the photograph that we're seeing here looks like it's all flash lit, in fact, but it's all natural light. It's just one of the characteristics of working underneath of a pier where we get actually light coming in from behind, as well as obviously the open light giving us direction, but still by the overhead of the pier from above subtracting the light. So not only are we practicing the animation and the posing and where to stand and where to shoot from, but we're also looking at the different locations that will actually add us more variety into the normal shoot. So what you want to be practicing if you're going to be doing more posed imagery is making sure you know how to do the full length, and then looking at the 3/4 length, coming through the close-up, cropping through the bust, and then obviously into the head and shoulders images, and what kind of variety that you can create during that time. I would say that when you're practicing with the bride and groom photography, always run through a little bit of a rattle, where they're going to be looking at you for some of the images, where they're going to be looking at each other for some of the images, and they're going to be looking away for some of the images. That alone will allow you quickly to add in some variety in towards your shoot. But if you're putting a couple together to actually do a sample kind of test, make sure you really mix it up on the day and shoot kind of as much variety as you can. Set yourself some tasks, set yourself like a Pinterest board so you can kind of get some ideas, and then basically use them on the likes of your phone or print them out so you can get some idea how you're going to run and flow through the images. But it all has to revolve around some style. So it's tip number 2 is make sure you practice with the likes of a bride and groom. Tip 3, really, it's a big one, and it's trying to identify what type of wedding photographer you want to be and concentrate on that as the core of your photography. So in other words, if you want to be a photographer who's going to create more dramatic, dynamic images, then you've got to make sure that you're attracting in the right couples, those who are going to set away some time for you to be a creative photographer. Now, as time is never our friend on the wedding day, we've got to make sure that we're really kind of focusing in on that small 4-5 minutes of time to create amazing few images. So it could be shooting from low to high, putting a couple with skies in the background, creating silhouettes. You might be choosing architectural locations with very wide angle lenses where they're just actually placed in a position of kind of natural animation where they're chatting away to each other. But no matter what style you are, you've got to think about, these images are going to represent a couple's happiest day on their lives, and you've got to make sure that you kind of are able to shoot the variety that the couples are going to be wanting you for. So not only do we need to practice when we're getting going a lot, we need to also start on the journey of style development to make sure we're ensuring that we're going to actually be attracting in the clients. Otherwise, you could be shooting images that nobody really wants to be booking you for, and then of course it's never going to be a business. What I would encourage you to do, though, is to make sure that you're really aspiring to the most amazing images than just the mediocre ones. Just because you think it's what photography you should be doing on a wedding, you've got to identify actually what real couples today really want from their wedding photography. Wedding photography doesn't change very often, but there are some key fundamental things that you need to actually address. Things like, am I going to be photographing groups? Am I going to be photographing couples? Am I doing any posed images? Am I going to be photographing in the bride's home beforehand? All of these things are going to be questions you're going to be asking yourself, and possibly they're going to be questions that a bride and groom are going to be asking you. So the 3 tips about getting started are just the beginning of your journey getting into the professional world of wedding photography. Good luck. For more tips and tricks, check out the Academy, of course, or our brand new Xperience wedding series.